You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 27. This podcast is dedicated to circus. It's a place for professionals to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into the industry. Hey friends, fans, and enemies. I'm Shannon McKenna, and I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. My guest today is Chris Petterson, and in addition to being an amazing slackline artist, Chris is actually also a Patreon. Or more specifically, his girlfriend Mara is a Patreon. That means even before I knew of their work, I knew they were listening and supporting the podcast, which is so freaking cool. I love that it's not only people who are interested in the industry that are listening to me, but people who are actually working that are listening. It really makes me feel relevant. I really wanted this podcast to be a gift. So if you are a circus artist working, you're making your money, you're putting on your makeup, you're going to work every night or every day or whatever you're doing, thank you for listening. I hope this is entertaining for you guys. And if you want to be on the podcast, send me an email. If you want to be super cool, like Chris and Mara, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and become a Patreon today. Chris Petterson is a slackline artist originally from Oslo, Norway. He attended the esteemed, I've got to speak French again, École Supérieure des Arts, also known as ESAC. It's in Brussels. He went on to perform in circuses such as Circus Monty, Cirque du Soleil in Windhoek, and the London Olympic closing ceremony in 2012. With his girlfriend, Mara, he created a revolving ladder act, which they perform together now in shows such as Cirque Buffon. I gave this interview literally sitting under a blanket. I Skyped with Chris while I was teaching in Austin, Texas, and I was trying to block out some of the noise. So if you hear random barks or meows during our interview, it's because I've got errant pets running around my room. Here's my interview with Chris Petterson. Well, Chris Petterson.
That's true. That's me.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Can you tell everyone at home who you are and what you do?
I am mainly specialized in slack rope balancing, and then I branched out a little, and I'm also doing object manipulation and some aerial kind of revolving ladder nowadays.
Yeah, that's such a cool act. I want to talk about it a little bit later. But I want to start with, how did you start? I saw on your website you were slacklining when you were 6 years old?
I went to the circus when I was 6 years old with my mom, and I saw a guy balancing on a slack wire, which is loose, saggy kind of tight rope. Basically, you can swing on it, which is what I loved the most when I saw his act. And then so I told my father that's what I want to do with my life. And then
what did your father say?
Let's build one. And then he did. The next day, he put a rope between the fence and the house wall, and then I had a broomstick in my hand, which I supported myself on. And I started practicing, and ever since that day, I never really stopped practicing and balancing. So, so every day after school, after my homework, I was on the rope for like an hour, while my friends were watching me playing soccer. You know.
What do you love about it? What do you think made you want to practice instead of playing soccer?
The freedom I get on the rope, actually, it's funny because some people say, well, you're so limited to just that tiny little space, but I feel like I have more freedom up there on the rope than I have on the ground. I feel like I can move more, and I can do stuff. I can move in a way that I cannot move on the ground, because basically your whole balance point shifts once you're on the rope. It's your point of balance is no longer like on your feet. It's also up on your arms, and when you're suspended from something in the air, like an aerialist, then your balance is also shifting, right?
For sure.
So it's that freedom that I get from being on the rope and then be able to move just in a different way that I cannot do on the ground.
When did you start doing like the rolls and all of that?
So I was practicing on my own together with my mom in the garden until I was 15. Mm-hmm. Then I moved away from home to do circus schools. There was no kid circus or anything around where I was growing up.
And where did you grow up?
Outside of Oslo in Norway. The kid circus schools, they came later, maybe 10 years ago they started popping up, but that was too late for my education. But there was one, and there is still one circus school in Norway, like a preparatory circus school. And I did that one for 1 year before applying for a circus school in Sweden. And I did that school for 3 years, which you have 2/3 are normal subjects, and then 1/3 is circus-based education.
So you do like your academic classes?
Exactly.
For 2/3.
You have your math, you have your language classes, and basically whatever they want you to learn. And then also after school, you can also use the training hall.
Nice.
It was really good, which we used that until like midnight sometimes. Yeah, we were 16 in my class there, and 4 of us continued the circus path after school. So you don't necessarily go there to become a circus artist. Some of us do, and most of us don't. Okay, so
I think this is quite common a lot in kind of preparatory arts programs, that you kind of have like that filter of people who just kind of do it because they like it, or they do it because it's their interest at the time, but then they find something else or
exactly, yeah.
Move on. So then you went to Belgium?
Exactly. I went to École Supérieure des Arts du Cirque, or ESAC.
Yes.
And I guess you heard about it.
A couple of times, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're also, in addition to being the first balance artist, the first person I've interviewed who's gone to ESAC.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's some really cool artists coming out of the school, though, and have been making work right now. Is the audition process similar to what it was when you were there?
You mean like nowadays?
Yeah.
Or how it was, how many years ago? 13 years ago, when I did this?
I guess it's changed a bit, hey?
I think so, yeah. But I think they keep the same structure as they had before. Basically, you are there for 1 week, or it's 6 days from Monday to Saturday. The first 3 days, we were 120 people, and then they kicked out 60. So you do all the tests, the physical tests, the running tests, there's flexibility tests. You also have to show your act before they choose who they want to keep for the next part of the audition process. And then they just continue with the test, basically. But on the last 3 days, you also have more like normal classes.
Like so normal, like academic, or normal, like dance and theater and that
normal
kind of thing?
When I say normal, I mean more like circus normal. So you have trampoline classes, and you have acrobatic classes, and you have classes with this teacher, which you will eventually have also for your chosen discipline.
And what was your time like at the school?
It was, it was hard in one way, but it was a lot of fun in another. It's a lot of training. It's very hard physically and mentally. School is 6 days a week. There is no free time. Basically, you just go home and you eat and you sleep and you go back to school the next day.
Yeah.
Well, but I learned a lot during my time in ASAC about like the technical skills, of course, but also about how to promote yourself as an artist.
When Mara sent me your website, I was really admiring like how easy it is to look at all of your acts. You put everything online. And then when you sent me that little booklet with your technical writer and all of that, I was like, oh, this is really well made. Do you guys do all of that yourself? Yeah,
we do. But it's something that has evolved over the last 4-5 years since I met Mara. And it's been much easier now to find out how to promote yourself now that we are 2 people, because I've been working professionally for 10 years and together with Mara now with 5 years. Before I met Mara, I didn't really have anybody to talk to about or to discuss how I should promote myself as a performer. I mean, I've talked to my friends, but it's much easier when you have somebody so close to you that knows you so well to know how to promote yourself as an artist, I think. And we also have more or less the same goals when it comes to work and where we want to work and where we like working.
You finished school, and did you finish with the Piranha Act?
Yes, I did actually, and that's the only act which we have in our portfolio, which was created together with the director.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because during the last year of school, I worked together with Samuel Journeau. He used to be the director of the Tilburg School in Holland.
Mm-hmm.
But then he came to Isaac to work with me, which was really nice because we had really the same kind of humor and the same kind of way of thinking about the act. For the idea with the fish and the goldfish came from the fact that we wanted to take the attention away from me on the rope. So I had the idea of having a glass of water, then I had a bottle of water, and then I had a bowl of water, and then just as an idea, I came up with this, okay, now I have a bowl of water, let's put a fish in there. So we did. So I started off with having a real goldfish.
I was going to ask if you ever did it with a live animal.
I did for that last week of presentations in the school. Yeah, there was a real goldfish. And then I got a contract with Circus Monti in Switzerland. And they wanted the act, but they didn't want a real fish because of animal protection rights and everything like this. And ever since that day, I have not worked with a real fish again, actually. And it works anyway. The act is more silly without the real fish, but people seem to respond better to it. So I keep the plastic goldfish for now. It's spinning with a motor, so if you're not sitting too close, then people come up and they ask, "Hey, is it a real fish?" And we actually get the animal protection rights activists anyway who are calling and saying, "Hey, you have a real goldfish in your show, and you say that you don't have real animals in the show." It's like, yeah, but it's not real. So.
I have a question for you about your rigging. I've been backstage at a lot of the GOPs, and I've seen the setup for slacklines, and I'm wondering how you fit it into one of those stages.
Well, the GOP theater is all quite different. Most of them have these trusses on the side, these Euro trusses, I think they call them, and they go all the way up to the ceiling. And I have this rigging system where I only use cables to rig my slack rope. And that's the system that I used in all of the theaters of GOP except Hanover because it's so small. So you have one cable going up to the top, and then you have two cables going down to the floor on each side. It's super easy to rig during the show. It takes a bit more time to rig it the first time, but once it's there, it's set, and you don't have to care about marks on the floor or anything because everything is just suspended.
But do you have a platform like on Tightwire?
Yeah, I do. So for the other act that I do, where I combine the slack line with the slack rope, where they are perpendicular to each other, then I use platforms.
Gotcha. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between Tightwire and slack rope and slack line?
I can try.
Okay.
I mean, it's quite hard because there's so many different styles and ways of doing it. I have a little list here. Actually, I'm going to find it.
Nice.
So I try. So slack line, it's 1 or 2 inch flat or tubular elastic webbing. Okay. Got it?
Yeah.
The tight wire, it's a 1/2 inch static steel wire cable.
Yes. And I always associate like tight wire is much more traditional to me.
It is. Yeah.
Right? Like that's kind of like a time-honored circus discipline.
Exactly. Except in the old days, it was used with rope. Then you have the slack rope or the slack wire, which is the same as the tight wire, but with sag. So it's not tense in any way. The only tension comes once you are on it. And so the slackline, it's something that came from the climbing scene, actually. It didn't come from the performer scene. So it came like 30 years ago. People started walking on the webbing that they use for climbing. And then like 8-9 years ago, some people started to tense this webbing so that they can jump on it. So it's kind of like tight wire, except it's much softer when you fall on it. but the tight wire itself doesn't have any bounce to it. So then you normally add this spring on the side of it. But on the slackline, all the bounce come from the line itself.
This podcast is brought to you by The Artist Athlete. Did you know that The Artist Athlete is more than just a podcast? It's a growing online resource for students of the aerial arts to deepen their journey to badassery by accessing techniques approved by physical therapists and master coaches in the industry. Our current spotlight is on the fundamentals of aerial alignment, a practical manual for hanging upside down. This online manual is a step-by-step guide. It is complete with photos, videos, and exercises that you can implement immediately to help you gain the strength and awareness you need for an aerial practice that promotes shoulder health and longevity and good posture upright, so you don't walk around like a gorilla. But don't just take my word for it. Here's Circus physical therapist Dr. Jen Crane of Circ Physio to tell you more.
The fundamentals of aerial alignment is an absolute must-have for every aerialist of every level. I can't even tell you how many shoulder injuries I treat that are a direct result of rushing past the basics in an attempt to get a trick too soon. In the manual, Shannon deconstructs the fundamentals, including the correct muscular engagement to safely arrive in these positions and the rationale for why it matters. Of course, in addition to all of these fabulous pearls of wisdom, the book is also ridiculously fun to read. It's been lovingly garnished with the Shannon humor we all know and love.
Thanks, Jen. Circ Physio is also featured in the book to give scientific insight into why it all works. Pick up your copy today by going to theartistathlete.com and clicking e-manuals. Listeners of the podcast can get a 10% discount by typing in the offer code PODCAST at checkout. Again, that's theartistathlete.com, offer code PODCAST. Now, back to the show. What's the highest you've ever slacklined?
With security on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about 15 meters above a river, actually.
Whoa.
Yeah, that sounds a lot, but people do it, crazy high nowadays, so that's like nothing.
I know, people do it crazy high. I'm so curious, what that's like. Are you so comfortable that you're just kind of like, yeah, whatever, I don't care?
Well, on 15 meters, I was still kind of scared, even though I was attached, with a harness and everything. If I would have fallen, it wouldn't have been a disaster. But yeah, it's quite different because and it was above a river as well. So the river was moving under me, and so your point, you can't really focus your point of balance on the ground anymore. You have to just use your ears, because that's where your balance organ is.
Oh, interesting. I never thought about it like that. Is that something you think about commonly when you're balancing? The vestibular system or your inner ear?
I have no idea what I'm thinking about, actually. I'm just doing it.
You're just thinking about looking awesome on stage.
And not fall.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I was also experimenting with, being blindfolded. It's quite a big difference. You have to be much more concentrated on each step, on each sound. And then you really feel alone also.
Is tight wire, I think about balancing, hand balancing, where if you don't practice it for a long time, it gets a bit harder. Is slacklining and that kind of balancing work like that? Or is it something like riding a bike where you can kind of pick it up or come back to it whenever?
I think your body still remembers how to do it. But if you take a longer break, you should, of course, be careful. Because even if your mind remembers, your body might not be physically fit to do what you used to do, right?
Yeah.
So, if you continue training other things, then I think it's okay. But I never really took a longer break from the stack rope.
Do you have any drills or practices that you do without the equipment that help you with your balance?
Anytime I see something that I can't balance on, I normally try that out, actually. In the streets, fences or whatever.
What's your favorite thing to balance on that's not a slackline?
My favorite thing to balance on that is not a slackline?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Well, I did also balance on a chairlift for, on the ski centers.
You did?
Yeah.
That's
because
cool.
It was the summer, it was closed, so I just climbed
Nice.
up on the chair, up on the cable, and just did a crocodile up there. It was kind of fun.
Nice. So you've worked for Circus Monty, you've worked for a lot of the variety shows, you've done Young Stage, you've done Demand, you've done all of that. Do you have any contracts that you prefer?
The one I'm doing right now is actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, what are you doing?
I'm doing a show in Germany with a circus called Cirque Buffon.
Mm-hmm.
It's the director is French, but he's been living in Germany for 20 years. And he started this show in a very, very small tent. And the stage is only 5.5 meters in diameter.
Wow.
It's a round stage, and people are sitting all around you. So you're very close to the audience when you're performing. I am sweating on the audience when I'm on my rope. It's funny.
How does that change your presentation or when you're performing? Does it?
It does, yeah. I don't have to do that much acting, like big fake acting. It can be very real and realistic. And you also have to act with your back because they're sitting behind you as well.
What do you mean by that? Act with your back?
You can do facial expressions with your face, but the people in the back won't see that. So you also have to act with your whole body, actually.
Huh.
Or you have to turn around and do the same thing the other way. So sometimes you have to forget about what you do with your face and just try and do it physically instead.
In this show, how many acts do you do?
I do my slack rope act with a combination of the slackline and the revolving ladder with Mara.
So let's talk about the revolving ladder act.
It's actually a very old circus discipline. I didn't invent it. And the idea didn't come to me. I didn't like that either. I didn't think of it myself. I saw a guy in 2006 doing this act in a circus, and I always really liked that act ever since when I think about acts that I liked. And I had this idea of maybe trying to do something. And then I met Mara and I said, yeah, I have this idea with the ladder. And she said, yeah, let's do it. I want to do it too. And she had no idea what I was talking about. And I don't really think that I had any idea how difficult or how dangerous it would be, actually. We constructed it together with a technician. We rigged it up, and we saw that it was maybe a bit too much for us. No, but we started practicing just really slowly, and then trying to find interesting figures and moves. What can we do with this 60-kilo heavy ladder that is spinning and not really cooperating, you know? But you get used to it quite fast. I mean, the first night I was, in my bed, and I still had this feeling I was swinging, when you're on a boat. But that quickly passed, and then we came up with some figures and some moves that we could do together. The thing with our ladder is that we have it quite close to the ground. It's been when it's standing up, it's only 20 centimeters from the ground. But usually what they did in the old days is that they had it spinning really high up in the air. We don't have to be on it all the time. We can change from Mara being on it to me being on it in only 5 seconds, which is quite interesting. Yeah.
Do you know Wheel of Death and these kind of really big ones?
Sure, we call it the ladder of life.
The ladder of life. I love it. What was the process like to choreograph on the ladder?
We took all the moves we had found, we filmed it, and then we found the music that we liked. And then in Final Cut, we just put the figures together and tried to find transition between the figures. So, and then in the end, we had an act on the computer and a video. And then we took the video to the training space, watched it, and tried to make those transitions for real.
So you choreographed it through video on a computer?
Exactly.
I've never heard of anybody doing that before.
Well, we had all the tricks filmed. We didn't really have the transitions. So we just put what we thought could fit together after each other.
Have you ever developed any other kind of work like that?
I think I did the same with my trickline act, actually.
When you were choreographing, do you and Marta, how do you work on that? Because I know you've been doing it a bit longer than she has.
Yeah, she doesn't have the circus education background. She was training horses and riding horses. So she has the balance, and she has the strength as well. And then later she has also started training straps, which is really cool.
Yeah, I saw her video. She's beautiful.
Yeah. And then Yeah, so we are, we work together and we have both very strong opinions. So sometimes it's a bit difficult. But in the end, we both want the same result and the same thing. So even if we are sometimes arguing about how to do things, the end result is quite clear for us. But yeah, we have a lot of respect for this thing, for sure, for the ladder. Like, you cannot fall from it. If you fall from it, or you have to also trust your partner 100% that he's gonna be there where he has to be. If you get hit by it, you get a lot of pain, or if you fall from it, you might get yourself really badly injured. So,
is there anything you do mentally before you start your rehearsing or your performing to kind of like get you in that focus?
It's kind of funny because we have very different ways of warming up, me and my girlfriend. So we warm up separately. We don't really do anything together. Just the last minute before we go on stage, we have a little ritual. Actually, we hug each other and say, "Be safe, be careful, have fun," and then we go on stage and we do our job.
Like, so when you're warming up independently of her, what's your process?
Well, because I also in the show now I do the slack rope act first, so I warm up specifically for that. I will all my joints. I do some handstands on the floor because I can't really go on the line before I can go before the show, but not during the show. And my act is 1 hour into the show, so it doesn't really help me to go on the line before. So I pretend like actually the backstage I have like a line on the floor, and I pretend like that's my line. I do some jumps and twists and turns, and mentally I think I'm doing a front flip, kind of on the floor.
Yeah.
Just to like get your mind set on what you're gonna do. For the ladder, I don't have any specific warm up. Just making sure that all my joints are working properly.
How long did it take you to develop that act before you knew you could put it on stage?
1 month.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but that's a completely different act though than the one we're doing now. It was much slower in the beginning, and we took much more care about where we placed our hands, and where we placed our feet. But we had a finished act after 1 month. I'm not gonna lie.
That's pretty cool, though. I feel like after someone who's been doing slackline, which is something that takes so long, to be able to create something so quickly must be really nice.
For sure. But yeah.
What's up for you guys next after Cirque Buffon?
Take 1 month break, but not really, because we have to create a little show. Because we do a kindergarten tour next year in Norway. Yeah.
That's fun.
Just Mara and me. Go for a 6 weeks tour in Norway. 3 shows a day in 3 different kindergartens. The show is based around recycling and the plastic in the ocean and how bad this is for fishes, which ties nicely into the whole goldfish theme of...
yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah. Going to teach kindergartners how not to throw plastic in the ocean, be a bit more careful with how much plastic they buy in the shop. I don't know,
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, do you have anything else to add? We're kind of coming toward the end of the interview, and I have my final question that I always ask.
Right. Yeah, sure. So you told me you never have you ever seen anything like this booklet that I sent you?
I have seen people do little things like that,
Yeah.
but not as often. Usually, like, technical writers are really, really dry. Even mine is like really just like it's a document.
So you liked it?
I loved it. Yeah,
Okay.
it's so well. I mean, like, it's got beautiful pictures of you guys. The font is really nice, and all of the design on it is really good.
Yeah, because earlier I used to send around DVDs a lot, but we don't do that anymore, right?
No,
just,
nobody does that anymore.
Exactly. So, but it was kind of nice because then you could design your DVD really nicely with a nice cover and pictures, and people had something physical in their hands that they could see before they pop the DVD into the player. But now you can't do that anymore. So I had this idea of making this nice little PDF booklet, which kind of is the replacement for that DVD, where they also get the tech writers immediately in their hands, because we came to places where they haven't even looked at the tech writers. We did a tour in the UK. We brought the ladder over, and we thought that we're gonna were going to do the act, during this tour. But they hadn't even looked at the take riders, so that act never happened. But we did the tour anyway with another act, so.
That sucks. Yeah. That's really smart, though. So you made it really nice to look at, so people wanted to look through it. That's great.
And so they also know that the tech riders are in there, so they don't have to send them separately. Mm-hmm. Everything is kind of just there in this booklet.
And you put all of your work online too, all the full videos and everything.
Yeah, everything is all the acts are there on the front page. But if you want to, you can also go and see previous acts or on the portfolio section, which I kind of like. It's still there. It's just a bit more hidden or secretive. It's still there. It's like a Easter egg.
Sweet. And I'll definitely put a link to that in the description of the show so people can go to your website and check out all your stuff.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I also make websites, actually. I made this whole thing myself. So
it looks great. Well done.
So if somebody wants a website in the same theme, then please contact me.
Where can they contact you for that? Just at your email address?
Yeah, chris@bankine.com. It's probably BANQUINE.
Have you made websites for a lot of circus performers?
Yeah, mostly for friends, but also for some companies. Sometimes people say, we don't need a website. We have Facebook or we have YouTube. But I still think that a website is a nice place to really put your best stuff and to have a little home for you online. That's what I think.
So what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
I've been thinking about that one, and I would probably say think outside the box. Don't limit yourself to what you think something is supposed to be. Don't get stuck on an idea that something has to be a certain way. Because I didn't say that in the beginning, but the circus that I went to as a traditional circus when I was 6 years old, and in Norway at the time, traditional circus was the only circus. There was no contemporary circus at all. So I only experienced contemporary circus when I was 15. When I went to Sweden, I said, hey, there's a whole other circus world out there that I didn't know of. So my mind was set on that circus has to be in one way, with these glitter costumes and the string bathing suits and whatever. That's the circus that I knew for 10 years. So there was a revelation for me when that whole other world opened up.
That's amazing.
So I wish that I had known about the other kind of circus world a bit earlier.
What do you think would have happened if you had known about it earlier?
I think I wouldn't have been that stuck on the idea that my act had to be a certain way. And that I had to do these tricks and in this glitter costume. And I like glitter costumes, but that it has to be...
Who doesn't like glitter costumes? I love glitter costumes.
Well, but they don't have to be all that traditional, It's good that we have this both of these roles.
Nice. Well, thanks so much, Chris, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
That was my interview with Chris Petterson. I am so thankful that Chris took the time to come be a guest on the show. It was super awesome and really informative to have him. Slackwire and most balancing arts are something I know virtually nothing about, so I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. Here are some things that stuck out for me. First of all, on a purely technical note, it was really neat to have Chris tell us the difference between a tight wire, a slackline, and a slack wire. According to Chris, a slackline is a 1 or 2 inch tubular or elastic webbing. A tight wire is a 1/2 inch static steel cable that's pulled very tightly, and a slack wire is the same as a tight wire, but without tension. Chris tells us that slackline came from the climbing scene, so it's a relatively contemporary art form that made its way onto circus stages, which makes me really want to compile a list of other weird crossover skills and disciplines that have made their way into circus. If you want to contribute to that list, I think I'll stick it in the Facebook group, Friends of the Artist Athlete Podcast. You can go check it out there. On a more philosophical note, I loved it when Chris talked about respecting the ladder of life, as he calls it, the revolving ladder. This idea of having respect for the equipment you work on is super important, and I think it's one way I differentiate a serious student or a professional from just a hobbyist. If I see someone who just wants to play and have fun on the equipment and they're jumping or swinging around or trying tricks before they're ready or skipping out on conditioning, it's usually an indication to me that they may not fully understand what can go wrong, or that they're not really honoring how to correctly prepare their bodies for the work necessary. Whether it's the ladder of life, a slackline, a German wheel, or an aerial silk, you have to make sure to respect the equipment you're on. The last thing I want to point out about Chris's interview was how much I gushed over Chris's marketing and the technical writer. For those of you who don't know, a technical writer is generally a really dry one-page document that you send to an agent or the venue or wherever's putting you up. And it's all of the requirements about how to set up the stage and the necessary equipment you need from the venue so that you can perform your act. Sometimes it also has other needs on it. If you need warm-up time or a warm-up space, you can specify that on your technical writer as well. So like even jugglers will have technical writers, right? Even though they don't have any equipment, there are necessary things that a venue needs to have in order to accommodate their acts. And I'm talking about all this because Chris sent me his technical writer. He actually sent me an entire packet about him and Mara and all of their acts. And their website has the same kind of material on it. It has all their acts. It has kind of the style that they work in. And I am gushing about it because even though I'm not a agent or anyone who's casting shows, I do get requests from people who are professional circus artists all the time. And when I do, I'm always like, well, can you send me a sample of your work maybe or something? Because I know some people, but I certainly don't know everyone in the industry. And if I can't see any evidence online of anything that you've made or done, I generally will not interview you. If you want to be a professional in this industry, whether it's a teacher or a performer or an agent, really anything in the world now, if you want to be a professional, take some time and invest some money in building yourself an online presence. I know a great web developer, if you're interested. To see the Balancing Ladder Act, the Goldfish Act, Mara's Straps Act, and all the other work this duo have to offer, you can go to maraandchris.com. That's MARA and Chris.com. You can also follow Chris on Instagram, Chris Petterson Official. For training tips and information of the aerial arts variety, you can follow me on Instagram at _artist_athlete. I'm also on Facebook, The Artist Athlete, and my website is theartistathlete.com. To directly support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. I've got some amazing guests coming up in the next few weeks, so make sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening. And if you love what you're hearing, leave a rating and woo-woo. A rating and review. That's what I meant to say. I'll talk to you next week, friends, fans, and enemies. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete Podcast, straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So, if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and slings and ropes by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus. And that's why I'm Patreon.